Ladies and gentlemen. My task today is to show you the economic effects of the import ban that was imposed to control chemical fertilizers and pesticides coming into the country. So first of all, I would like to thank the SLIAC as well as Sri Lanka Agricultural Economics Association for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this aspect. So I have organized this presentation into basically 4 categories. First, I will introduce you to the idea of banning imports and what they are and how do they affect an economy. And then I will move on to this particular ban on agrochemical imports imposed by the government of Sri Lanka about a month ago. And in order to explain those effects, I will share with you the structure of the agriculture economy, and then I will move on to short run and long run effects of this particular policy instrument. And finally, I will share with you my thoughts for a way forward. Okay, so let me first tell you what an import ban is. Okay. Import ban is nothing but a prohibition of imports. So what it does is that it prohibits imports coming into a country for a sector, and it insulates an economy from the rest of the world completely. So what it says is that the world market price or quality signals will not be transmitted to the country under consideration. So this inhibits trade gains. So countries are very, very careful in imposing import bans. They do that when it is absolutely necessary, like when you are having a problem with bird flu or foot and mouth disease, then you control imports from such countries on particular products. However, in Sri Lanka, this is not been so uncommon if we look at what happened over the recent past. But I would say that this is a kind of notorious trade instrument. The issue today is banning of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Are they really bad or hazardous products? Of course, I really do not have to explain that as an economist. The experts in the subject like Professor Samandarmakirti, Professor Nugaliyadda, and Professor Indika Karunatilaka very well explained you the nature of this products. And if we use them wisely, of course, there are enormous benefits to the society. And I personally do not think that this kind of regulations are to be imposed on products like agrochemicals. And what will happen if you impose an import ban? Of course, it is already being imposed, but I would like to share with you the marginal benefits to the society from an instrument of this sort and marginal costs. So this is what we normally do as economists. We look at the current situation and we compare the cost added to this society and the benefits that we get. Okay, so if we look at import bans on agrochemicals, of course, there will be savings to the government because we were having a subsidy scheme on chemical fertilizers. The government can save on that. And this will create an opportunity for producers and importers of substitutes like organic fertilizers and pesticides. And also, we expect that the environment would be toxic free and the environmental quality will be good or better. However, these benefits can be acquired at a huge cost to the economy. Okay, the incomes of growers of paddy, tea, vegetables, maize, floriculture, they all will be affected. So it won't stop there. There will be spill over adverse effects on raw material suppliers, collectors, transport agents, processors, wholesalers, retailers, and also consumers like you and me. And also, there is a possibility of creation of monopolies, those who get licenses or powers to import substitute items can create monopolies because they now have an insulated market environment. Okay, so we actually can see that there will be huge costs, but in order to see how big are these costs as opposed to the benefits of a policy of this sort, we should have to have a good understanding of the setting or the context. Okay, so in order to give you that setting, I would like to very briefly share with you the structure of our own economy, paying a special attention on the agriculture sector. Okay, so let me move to the next slide. All right, we all know that the agriculture sector is fairly small in the Sri Lankan economy, and right now the contribution from agriculture sector is like 7%. However, if you look at the subsectors of agriculture, those who are likely affected by an import ban of this sort are quite large. So around 5% of our agriculture sectors constituted by crop agriculture. Okay, so there will be a huge impact on agriculture sector with a policy of this sort. And if you look at employment statistics, around 25% of our labor force is employed in agriculture, and out of that employment, majority is in rice, vegetables, and tea. Okay, so what it says is that if something happens to these crops, there will be implications on employment and income. And if you look at income and expenditure of our households, around 80% of income is coming from agriculture sources, and we spend like 35% of our expenditure on food, meaning that if food prices go up, our food plate will be affected because we are getting 92% of calories, 67% of protein, and 74% of fat from crop agriculture sources. Okay, so this is serious. If something happens to crop agriculture, the entire economy will be affected. Okay, and not only that, the exports and imports. If you look at our export and import structure by SITC classification, you can say that we heavily depend on exports of tea and spices. Okay, and what comes second is vegetable and fruits. So we actually have a very much connected economy, and if something happens to these sectors, the economy will be in trouble. And on the other hand, we are dependent on the rest of the world for our imports. So if there are shortages in crop production, there will be implications on import bill as well. Okay, so with that introduction to the structure of the economy, let me show you some of the assessments that I did as well as my colleagues attached to the Sri Lanka Agricultural Economics Association did. So we actually did two types of analysis, one in the short run, the other one in the long run. The short run analysis is not really an economic analysis per se, it is simple computation. So what we did was we looked at the yield losses likely to be associated with moving to organic agriculture or no chemical fertilizer agriculture. And then we looked at how production quantities will change. And then we looked at our consumption pattern, our export pattern, our import pattern, and then we computed what happens to our imports, what happens to our exports, and what will be the likely effects on consumption if we do not allow imports to come in. Remember, we are having stringent restrictions on food importation as well. So what would happen to various subsectors of agriculture was the focus in our short run analysis. So let me show you what happens if there are losses in paddy sector and tea sector. And to do that analysis, we looked at the yield losses predicted by various experts. And these are some of the estimates given by the scientists in Sri Lanka at a forum held at the National Science Foundation. So what we did was that we picked a particular study done by one Sirisena and his team in 2016. Dr. Samandharmakirti also mentioned about this, and computed what happens to paddy production and rice production under various scenarios. What happens if we completely move to organic fertilizers? What happens if we do not have any fertilizers at all? Okay, so that can happen. So the estimates given by Sirisena and his team indicates that if we go to fully organic agriculture, yield loss can be as high as 25%. If we do not have fertilizers at all, yield loss can be as high as 43%. You know, huge losses. So if you convert them into production quantities, you can see that right now we are producing something like 4.47 million metric tons of paddy. And if we go for organic, it will be 3.28. And if we do not apply any fertilizers, it will be 2.5. Our consumption, if we consider that remains as 2.4 million metric tons of rice, then there will be shortages. And if we do a simple calculation, you will realize that we will end up spending around 10 billion Sri Lankan rupees on rice imports if we go for fully organic scenarios. And if we go for a no fertilizer scenario, it can be as high as 42 Sri Lankan rupees billion. Okay, and not only that, there will be reductions in profitability and also rice consumption if you do not allow imports to come in. So wheat exports will go up. So the effects are very sizable and adverse. And if you do a calculation for tea, in fact, this was done by one of my colleagues at the Tea Research Institute, and the estimates show that there will be drastic reductions in production as well as exports. If you consider that the same quantity is remained for local consumption, you will see that the export earnings can go down by 85 billion rupees. Okay, and you will see that this will have huge implications on our trade balance, and the profitability of tea cultivation will go down, and there will be serious effects on the estate sector more than those for the smallholders. Okay, there will be implications on coconut, other field crops and spices. My colleagues at Coconut Research Institute did some calculations, and they say that there will be reductions of export earnings of desiccated coconut and other coconut products, and that value can be as large as 18 billion rupees. So this is with the yield loss of 30%, and currently around 27% of coconut lands get chemical fertilizers. So considering only that portion of lands, okay, and the effects on maize and hence chicken can be sizable, and the effects on protected agriculture and floriculture can be huge. Actually, protected agriculture cannot be practiced with organic fertilizer. You need chemical fertilizers and pesticides. However, we do not expect huge losses for pulses and also spices grown in home gardens. Okay, so that actually is a simple calculation, but we did some detailed economic analysis using a global trade model, which can accommodate what happened in different sectors. Because when one sector is affected, all the other sectors are also affected, because an economy consists of all these interconnected sectors. So what we did was that we applied a modest yield shock, thinking that farmers would adapt, policymakers would adapt, traders would adapt, and then we looked at what happens to our economy. And let me show you the estimates that we got by applying 20% yield loss across all the agriculture subsectors. And what we saw was that there would be significant changes in trade pattern. Our imports will go up and our exports will go down, and there will be an increase in food prices, reduction in production of various agriculture subsectors, as well as the sectors that are connected to agriculture subsectors like processed food and food catering. Like the entire chain will be affected, and there will be a reduction in GDP by 2.65% if crop agriculture reduces by 20%. Okay, this is serious. And there will be reductions in technical efficiencies and welfare of the economy. And finally, the economy will be contracted. You will experience a slower growth rate on top of the adverse effects of the corona pandemic. And the impacts or the implications will not stop there. Economic activities in rural areas will be contracted, and farmers find that profits would go down, farm incomes go down, and those who work in the farmers will lose jobs, and they will see unemployment, and they may start migrating to urban areas. We are not ready to accept large masses of rural people in urban areas. We are not ready, even though it is a desirable aspect. And we can anticipate increase in poverty, malnutrition, and vulnerabilities, both in rural areas and urban areas. So the implications will be huge, okay? And this is ignoring the cost of creation of monopolies with the opening up of organic fertilizer market. And also the environmental costs associated with importation of organic fertilizers, which were very well explained by Prof. Samandarmakirti. So looking back at the benefits and costs, of course, what I explained you, the costs of this import ban on the economy of Sri Lanka, excluding the cost of creation of monopolies. But I agree that I did not pay that much attention to the benefits of this policy. Okay, but I have a valid reason for that. The issue is that the benefits are very, very uncertain. So what actually happens here is that due to the changes in market environment and policy environment, the entire production technology will be changed. So we actually do not know what the new technology is, how land using it is, how water using it is, how labor using it is. We really have to look at all these things. We simply cannot go by the success stories that we hear. It is only a very small fraction of our farming community engages in organic farming. Okay, so we simply cannot assume that we can scale up all these technologies to 100% overnight. Okay, so that is a risky business, and because of these reasons, I was a bit hesitant to talk about the magnitude of benefits that we would realize from a policy of this sort. Okay, there are challenges in scaling up. Technology is not sufficient. You have to have favorable institutions. You have to have markets, and there is this risk of climate change and natural disasters. So extrapolation of success stories to a full organic farming is something that we should not do. And here I'm showing you the organic extent in Sri Lanka, just to say that it occupies only 2.5% of our agricultural lands. Okay, so taking this 2.5 to 100% is not a simple thing to do. Yes, with this, I would like to bust a few myths regarding the economic effects of usage of agrochemicals, and this may be contrary to general perception. Okay, one thing we see from the previous presentations is that agrochemicals are not hazardous products if you use them wisely. Okay, and if you look at the global picture, you will see that our nutrient budget is very small. We are having a low input, low output production system. And Professor Indika Karunatilaka very nicely showed you a slide to show that pesticide residues are coming down over time. Okay, and if you stat data very clearly show that agrochemical usage, the synthetic fertilizer usage has been coming down recently. Okay, so this is something that people misconceive. People kind of think that we have been increasing usage of chemical fertilizers and pesticides over time. Of course, there was a period that it happened, but not in the recent past. And some people tend to think that import bans are ideal instruments to control something. No, it is not. So this is even against the WTO rules. We are a member country of the WTO, and we are actually going against the current. Okay, import bans inhibit trade gains, and also they invite monopolies. Okay, so the entire economy can contract due to imposition of policy instruments of this sort. And also, some people think that if there is a yield loss, we can compensate farmers. But a yield loss does not stop at the farm. It spills over to the entire economy. You very clearly saw that there will be reductions in exports, there will be increase in prices. The entire economy will be affected because we have forward linkages and backward linkages to agriculture sector. Even though agriculture sector occupies a small portion of the economy, its backward and forward linkages are very strong. Like our processed food sector also occupies an equal share in the economy, which is very strongly connected to agriculture sector. Okay, so compensation of farmers will not solve the problem. Okay, and also some people think that import bans can safeguard us in terms of balance of payment. Okay, however, when you impose an instrument like import ban on agrochemicals, it will reduce the potential that we have to export something. There will be direct effects on our exports, reductions in exports, as well as we can anticipate some increase in imports because production locally goes down. Okay, so import bans can worsen trade balance and the savings from fertilizers will lead to increase in exports of finished products and imports of finished products. And as I indicated earlier, scaling up of organic technologies is not linear. Even in the entire world, this is not a linear thing, and we need the right type of institutions, markets, and adverse climate may hinder scaling up. Okay, so we actually have to have scientific evidence before we make a decision of this sort. And Professor Indika Karunatilaka very clearly indicated that we have to go by systematic reviews to see what research tells us, not just by picking an article here and there. Okay, so a detailed scientific investigation is necessary before you jump into a policy like this. So my plea is that it is not too late. I think we all should request the government to lift this import ban. So it is not worth looking for alternative instruments at this moment while keeping this ban. If we lift this, then of course we can think of some other policy instruments to achieve the policy goal that we are having, that is to have a greener agriculture. Okay, so we can gradually reduce and eliminate the existing fertilizer subsidy, and we can introduce alternate fertilizers and alternate pesticides, and we can revisit our standards. We can provide subsidies. We can impose taxes on environmentally damaging inputs and outputs, truly damaging stuff. And also we can promote marketing of environmentally friendly produce, and we can promote adoption of good agricultural practices and good manufacturing practices. So we have actually jumped from a subsidy on an environmentally damaging product to an import ban. So that is way too drastic. We could have change this subsidy to a targeted subsidy, and we could have had a phase where there is no subsidy and slowly increase taxes on this kind of products if you really think that they are causing a serious harm. Okay, but there are other instruments rather than imposing a tax. So with that, I conclude. Thank you very much again. And if you have questions, I will try to respond them through chat. Thank you.